You're live.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking the time. My name is Pradeep Suchdeo. I'm the co founder and chief product officer at Settle. Together with me today are Harbinder Khera from Mindmatrix. Harbinder, if you don't mind introducing yourself, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pradeep, for having me on this session. My Harbinder Khera, founder CEO of Mindmatrix. Uh, so we provide partner enablement platform. Excited to be on this session today.
Jay, I know you don't need any introduction, but it would be good for some of the new listeners to get a sense for you.
Sure, absolutely. Jay Mcbain, Chief Analyst for Canalys. Canalys is Latin for channel. I go back 30 years, kind of figuring out the people, the processes, the underlying programs and technology, and everything that makes the industry run. So glad to be here as well and joining both of you.
Absolutely. So, everybody, I'm sure you've seen a lot of talk about partnerships, ecosystem. For those of you who follow Jay, definitely know Jay talks a lot about the 28 touch points that exist, 28 moments, talking about how you think about partners. And that's what this is about, is how in this landscape of partners being core to driving business, what is RevOps and how in that stream it has changed. And why did I pick this topic? I've been in the industry for 25 years, order to cash or billing, as they used to call it back in the day, and used to work with a lot of organizations. You may have heard of Microsoft, you may have heard of Cisco, Intel. All these organizations have massive revenue streams that depend on partners. And when I focused on order to cash, a lot of it was let's get money in the door. As we all know, in order to drive that business, you need partners to be happy, partners to be successful. And if you go by one third, one third, one third, right? One third has to be business has come from partners. How do you make sure in this 28 touch point world that you're keeping partners front and center as you grow your business? So that's what the topic is about, is RevOps. As it stands today, is it good enough or is that something that's changed? So that said, I'll kick it off a little bit to you, Jay. You talked about Canalys and how it looks at a lot more holistically. If you don't mind sharing a little bit of how do you think that changed, and then we can take that discussion in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Partnerships, if you look backwards, have been somewhat linear. If you look at the $105 trillion of the world GDP, 75% of that goes through partners. You bought your last car from a dealer, you bought your last TV from a retailer, you bought your last jar of peanut butter from a grocer. Everything we do in our personal and professional lives, the cash register is local or hyper local to us. And very rarely do we buy direct. The fact of the matter is RevOps for the first 40 years has really been connecting to the points of distribution and two and one tier models on how to get to that point of sale. Now, what's changing over the course of the last 5 years in particular, driven by a new, younger buyer. So by the end of this year, the majority buyer of a $5 trillion technology and telco industry, which today is 73.2% to through and with partners, is driving a new kind of digital first, digital only, subscription, consumption friendly, marketplace friendly environment. And we're at a point now where while the point of sale is important and the revenue ops and everything that go around that, getting to that point, you mentioned the 28 moments, before that point, around that point, for example, marketplaces are growing at 86%. So some of these ways that money change hands is quickly changing. And then most companies moving towards subscription and consumption models. That point of sale is only the first 30 days with the customer. And now we need to renew, we need to upsell, cross-sell, enrich every 30 days forever. So this cycle of selling, the cycle of revenue ops, the cycle of how we are running a platform economy, how the economics of partnering are changing. And there's one number I'll leave you with. The average customer today now has 7 partners they trust that influence them before, during, and after that transaction forever. And those 7 partners, 6 or more of them are non-transactional. So revenue ops is moving into a place where how we measure non-transactional behaviors, activities at all those stages is becoming critically important. And it's really changed for everyone in this industry. Over 10 million people that work at vendors in channel roles. It's changed how they get measured. It's changed how they think about partnering. And I'm just glad today that we're digging into this at a next level to talk about how we work underneath these trends to make them a reality.
Thanks, Jay. Harbinder, you've been in partnerships for a while. Would help to get a little bit of your perspective. I know you've got platform and you got a mindset and a mission in mind. Would you mind sharing a little bit of what and how you've seen it change over the years?
Absolutely. So just to give a little bit of background to everybody, I started this company 28 years ago, and we wanted to create a solutions marketplace, solution selling platform. And the idea was to bring the alliances, the ISVs together and form solutions, a solutions configurator. That was 28 years ago. Okay. Interesting enough, 28 years later, we're having this conversation. Seems like maybe I started too early. I'm not sure. But a lot has changed in the last 28 years. Okay. Obviously, the internet, changed, got better, faster, mobile. Now the evolution of AI, marketplaces, hyperscalers, all of that stuff has catapulted this whole business of alliances, co-creation, co-building, all the ISVs alliances coming together, creating products and solutions, and that has changed. Now, where we sit as a company, obviously, when I started out from the alliances side, that stuff didn't start the way I thought it should start. So Mindmatrix currently, we support, as Jay pointed out, like we have transactional partners, traditional transactional partners. You have MSPs, the VARs, and all these guys are traditional transactional partners. How do you enable them from marketing, sales, all of that stuff? So Mindmatrix historically has been involved in enabling those folks. Now with the rise of ISVs, now the enablement for the ISV is a little bit different. And so you need to focus on collaboration, solution selling, account-based mapping. So the mindset of enablement is different. So where we sit together, like we try to bridge the left side, the transactional side of the world, and the alliances side of the world together in one platform. Because as Jay pointed out, so on a given deal, you may have 7 partners, and some of them are transactional and some of them are alliances. How do you capture that attribution? How do you capture the data that is flowing and enablement across the board? That is the business Mindmatrix is in. So that's why the RevOps makes such an important piece for us is, yes, the data is flowing, the enablement is happening, and we're capturing data. But if the data is not put to use properly at the end, you got to make sure everybody gets paid accurately and there's a proper attribution, then there's no use. That's really we see working with Settle, how we can all work together.
Thanks, Harbinder. And you said a couple of keywords. I'm sure everybody's focusing on marketplaces, hyperscalers. That's become so common part of our terminology. And you mentioned something very important is capturing information across partners. Jay, you mentioned one partner of the 7 may be transactional. What about the others? What about the influencers? So your typical RevOps, which is order and transaction-based payments and rebates and incentives exist. But what about those other ones, right? And I think that's the question that we are asking ourselves. Is RevOps enough? And as settled, that's what we're focused on, is these snowflake, unusual partnerships. While absolutely transaction and order data is how you would typically still be paying your partners, what about those where you're receiving commissions and incentives? So it's money flowing both ways. If you're focusing on an application that only thinks of paying out, the dynamics change. In a marketplace, you could be receiving as well as transmitting money back and forth. And that's what we're about, is as Harbinder, you talked about, master agreement. I have 7 partners. I may have a master agreement. I want to basically be able to see the money flow across the board. And we're focusing on, as they call it, the unsexy back office. But that's important because you focus on cash flow. A CFO cares about cash flow when you've got this matrix of 7 partners. And that's what we learned over the years is it's great to have RevOps, but that's incomplete. What you really need to complete the picture in the marketplace world is partner revenue operations, where you start to think about holistically cash flow. You start to think about how your sales and revenue is going to be forecasted accurately, knowing what you might be receiving as well. So that's where we see clearly, to your point, as you enable your partners, transactional elements have to be supported. If you have a partner that sees an opportunity, they want to be able to see when they're going to get paid, because they are running a business as well. And that's what settle is about, is not settling, but actually truly understanding and settling and being comfortable that the monies are flowing in the right direction both ways.
Yep, I agree 100%. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on this? I have some additional thoughts. Please go ahead. I know
Yeah,
you.
I mean, let me simplify the problem. For 43 years, we've paid everything at the point of sale. We've run a structure where there's front end margins and then there's back end margins. The whole gross to nets in terms of partnering have only been paid out at one moment. And here's the problem with that. We all know that we work with partners in the past that might have done all of the marketing and the co-selling or reselling. They might have done all of the work up front. They might have done all the work at the point of sale. They do all the work after the point of sale. I mean, we literally owe our customer and that renewing customer for life, we owe everything to that partner. And we pay them a set amount at the point of sale. The next partner comes along, wins an RFP by being 5 cents less, and collects the customer's money and is gone in the night. Didn't do anything to get to that point. Didn't do anything after. We pay that second partner the exact same amount as the first partner. And so we've asked ourselves, wouldn't it be great from a RevOps perspective to start measuring and quantifying moments? Mm-hmm. So if a partner early on, let's say, just records a podcast, and we find that any customer that listens to that podcast has a 3 times better chance to buy our product than somebody who didn't. Well, that podcast is worth money to us. I just don't know how much at this point, but maybe it's worth a nickel, maybe it's worth a dime. But somewhere in your cost to acquire a customer, that was important. Now, the partner who did a consulting engagement, design, architecture work, the partner that did the configuration, price quoting, the partner that's just in there in those later moments, I mean, that might be worth more than a nickel or dime. That might be worth a material part of what your gross to nets are, what your cost to acquire a customer. So in this model, wouldn't it be great to break up those 28 moments, understand how much they're worth, and start paying that, what that one-time point of sale margin, and pay it out and spread it out like peanut butter? What it's resulting in is point systems. Microsoft, who you mentioned on the outset, was the first company to do this at a massive scale, and changing their gold, silver, bronze, changing their whole program at paying out once to partners now collecting points before, during, and after the transaction. Doesn't matter if they collect the money or not. It's these points are earned. That then went over to VMware. It went to HP. We're working with dozens of companies. And out of the 35,000 vendors today who have channel programs, I will say, as an analyst firm, that's one of our biggest inbound questions on inquiries is, how do I move from this old world, very linear and very, very uneven or unfair in the way it's played out? How do we move to this new world? And it's not just, I need to work a better spreadsheet. It's not I need to, hire 10 more people to count. It's, how do I automate? How do I think about my workflows, my processes, my business logic here? And how do I start connecting these dots and building out these data sets? And over the next couple of years, how do I train and tune large language models with these data sets so we can continuously get better at understanding every single moment and what partner value really means beyond the point of just collecting a customer's money on our behalf?
And Jay, you mentioned something, and I'll come to you here in a second, Harbinder. There is Excel spreadsheets, right? To your point, that's one of the reasons why we started Settle is despite, and I know you built that ecosystem and the 7-layer ecosystem where everybody talks about. Yet, if you ask finance, CFOs, controllers, how are you doing incentives? Well, I'm either doing Excel spreadsheets or heavily customizing ERPs and billing systems. That's the world we came from, and realizing you're investing millions here and your partner teams are relying on Excel spreadsheets when you're expecting a lot of that revenue. So that's basically why when we saw Harbinder and team talk a little bit about the enablement, what we realized is That's a fantastic way to capture and build a relationship. But what about the most important part is the economics of the relationship? How do I know what money is flowing? How can a partner accurately predict where it is that they're going to get that? And it won't be customizing a billing system or an ERP, which absolutely is the case today, or an Excel spreadsheet. You want something more modern. Harbinder, I know we talked a little bit about this, right? It's kind of creating that single pane of glass where today so much of the focus is opportunities, enablement. What about money, right? That's what in this, especially in this economy, and everybody talks about volatility. You want your partners to have that visibility. Thoughts around that?
No, absolutely. I was looking at the comment. This came from one of the viewers here that talked about data. So capturing data, I'm going to talk about, that your point in a second. This whole equation has to work if we have, we need to capture data at every action point. Okay. So there are many trigger points where Mindmatrix sits in. We're looking from marketing enablement, sales enablement, attribution, influencer marketing, giving them the tools. So we're looking at content syndication. We're kind of looking at the whole world. So the key from our perspective is a couple of things: that have the toolkit available to capture data sets, data points across the ecosystem. Are you influencing it? Are you referring a deal? Are you a service partner? What do you have done across? So if on a lead basis or opportunity basis, you're tracking end-to-end journey. Now, that's important because capturing a data, that is the key. And so capturing a data coming from disparate systems into one organized place. So coming back to the point is, your point is, there has to be an economic, you have a master agreement and bunch of agreements. There has to be in the system some kind of, place where you can create or develop economic relationship across all these different entities. You have an influencer for all types of different influencers, again, different touch points. Having a master template that maintains the economic relationship on a solution. Let's say multiple alliances coming together. Somebody has to take what is in the master agreement, first need to capture into a platform or some kind of a master economic relationship. And that is the key, because then you're going to, based on the economic relationship, the data that you're capturing, that has to be piped into, platform like Settle for commission calculation. So that's how I see it.
And you said something important. I'm sure, Jay, you have perspective as well, looking at the ecosystem. PDFs still, right? That's the other half of the equation. Contracts still sit in PDFs and documents, which can't be looked at. Excel spreadsheets end up being where computation is happening. And that's what we're changing in this world of your agreement has to be somewhere it can be looked at holistically, as you said. And a podcast can have a point system. An influencer may have different ways of reaching to an audience. How do you implement an agreement that is non-standard? Could be either pre-sale, during the sale, or post-sale, right? You've got so many different aspects of things. So that requires a new way of thinking, about the agreement itself. But more importantly, if it's transactional data, and I know we've talked a lot about influencers, that may be high volume, but low touch, because you're absorbing that information about influencers and comments and engagement. On the other hand, you've got a large deal, perhaps an Accenture supporting a deal, that could be a high touch, low volume instance, right? You've got so much complexity, which is velocity, volume, variability, and visibility, that all brings to the table very different elements, both in high touch and low touch environments. What are your thoughts, Jay? I know we certainly have a perspective in terms of it needs to be automated end to end. Can't just sit on traditional RevOps. You got to keep thinking partner revenue ops. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's this world of peanut butter. It's this world of, when we used to pay out dollars and now we're paying out nickels and dimes. So we're also paying out at different times than before. Again, in a world that measured itself on the point of sale, that kicks out one calculation, somewhat linear in terms of how you measure, monitor, manage that. In a world of you talk about influencers, there's 5 different levels of technology today to go and dig into those first 28 moments. And it might be, like Harbinder said, some sort of account mapping software. And if there is a match, and if that does trigger action, that's worth, and if you do win X percentage of those deals, there's a quantitative value to that. If it's just as simply as that podcast, generates that 3X, there's a value to that. That's an attribution technology. You add to that your deal registration, your opportunity passing, lead passing technologies. And then what Harbinder has is in terms of through channel marketing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if many of those moments in the first 28, the email, the social, the search, the syndicated content that surround the customer, are actually written on your platform? So it's not third-party data, it's not second-party data, it's now first-party data. When you can measure and attribute and then quantify those moments. And all you're going to do is you're never going to get all 28 moments. But if you can get, move from getting 0 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 of them, you can start getting better at understanding your customer's journey. And then obviously understanding what you need to do more of. Again, that's a critical piece of this, but it's only 1/3 of the pie. As important as all of those 28 moments before the point of sale, for every company now in subscription and consumption models, is every 30 days forever. You might have a managed service provider in there forever, every 30 days. You might have implementation and integration services, a number of ISVs that are driving up usage, the co-innovation, the co-development working there, the co-keep strategies, this enrichment of the contract over time. This is specifically what created Microsoft as a more valuable company than Apple, which has to develop a new product every September and sell a lot of them by Christmas. Wall Street has come around to the fact that, we kind of like boring, repeatable, reliable, scalable revenue. And if a company comes back with lots of revenue and it's 108% set it and forget it type of renewal rate, that's more valuable. And then if you just go down the Fortune 500 and look at the valuations today, that's exactly where the world's going. And anyone that's not in that category is trying to move there. So this is what we're working with underneath it, the programs, and then the quantification of how all this works. And so that we can better, as channel leaders, as partnership leaders, as alliance leaders, better deliver back to our own organization. And it's not just our own alliance group or channel group that used to be redheaded stepchildren over on the right. It's to the sales team, the CRO. It's to the CMO. It's to the head of CX. It's at the C-suite today, and it's into the board, wondering about these points of value, the go-to-market, the routes to market, the service available market, the service obtainable market. I'll just finish with one thing, because a couple of days ago, Salesforce published the state of sales. And they go out and interview 5,500 of the top sales leaders in the world. 89% of salespeople now are using partners. It's a ridiculously high number across all industries, across all parts of the world. For the 11% that aren't, 58% of them expect to in the next 12 months. We're going to be at a point where 95 to 96% of sales processes are wrapped around these 7 partners. Even more interesting, the final stat that came from that big report is that 84% of the salespeople that are out there today that have improved their numbers year over year in this difficult economy point to partnerships as the reason why. So this is the sales story. This is a marketing story. It's a CX story. And all of a sudden, we've gone from kind of a division that no one understands what we do to companies relying on us for their valuation and for their ability to grow. So this is the decade of the ecosystem. We just hit halftime at 5 years. And it's wonderful that we're having these conversations and have these really large audiences coming over and tipping their hat to what we've known forever, how important partnerships are.
That's staggering. Jay, you said 89%. Now, as you said, going to 95, 96. And sales, as I'm hearing you say, is going to be about partners. It's about all the different organizations that'll support and make sure you have a competitive advantage against your competition. Harbinder, you've probably been seeing this a lot across the years, specifically as you see this, right? I can imagine the platform thinks about the entire journey. There's a customer journey and there's a partner journey alongside. A lot of what you're doing is mapping the two. It's not in isolation. A partner comes on board. And I think, Jay, I've heard you say maybe 10% of your partners are transacting partners. How do you know the other 90%? I can imagine, Harbinder, right? You're trying to bridge that gap. Even if you move the needle, the 10% becomes 20%, right? That makes a huge difference to a business.
I absolutely agree. I think the key here is that how we capture the data across the board in a seamless way. As I said, I see the both sides of the coin. One is the transactional and one is the consumption side of the world. And how do you bridge the both sides? But one thing that I would say, I'm going to represent the folks on the transaction side. Even if we co-create, co-build products, let's say we're not going to the marketplace, still we need to rely on our transactional partners to sell your solution that you're trying to co-create or co-build. Okay, so we need to bring them along the way and getting them attribution the way we do traditionally and bridge the gap. I think the important thing is bridging both sides of the world together. Okay.
And you said something very important at the transactional side, which is exactly the bread and butter for us, right? You talk about transactions. I know, Jay, you've seen the hyperscalers change from bring me customers to bring me consumption. No longer, as you said, right? It's now a renewal game. Which partner helped the renewal? Perhaps one partner helped with the sign up, etc. So number one, capturing those different agreements where you get paid. But more importantly, how are the likes of Google, Microsoft, I'm sure that's going down the chain, compensating their partners based on usage data? It's no longer for billing, it's also for compensation. So seeing that from so many years, we're so happy to start to see where companies, as they say, finding religion. I know a lot of us may be atheists, but you're finding religion to say, how do you think about the other side of the fence? Can't be Excel spreadsheets because it's so critical to the pie. And just by ourselves, sometimes we say we're like the module that basically does safety, but that sits in a car. Harbinder, we see Mindmarix is that car and that dash and the interface to the partners, helping with the entire journey. How do you provide a very important safety module? Because it's how you're predicting where you want to go, your cash flow, your sales forecasting, creating that intelligence layer that the car can run, right? That's sort of where I know a lot of you may be caught into. That's the analogy I keep thinking of. There are many different modules, but safety is a critical module. In our case, we think of revenue as a lifeblood. That's sort of how I see ourselves kind of working together. And I know we've talked a little bit about this, Harbinder. It's not just signing on. There's also the payment aspect of things. Because the very first conversation I remember, we were talking to a founder who says, I'm signing on these agreements. And his only question was, but how do you pay out? Saying, absolutely, we'd love to help you, but let's get money in the door, because your challenge is as a startup, you're starting to figure out what to pay. Paying with PayPal, paying with the EFT is the easiest thing to do. Can we talk about that? So I'm glad you're talking, and this conversation is going to, let's focus on the important part of capturing. And then as we talk to organizations like Tipalti, that can actually bring the entire mix of right from signing on a partner, enabling a partner, attribution, transaction, calculating the commissions and rebates, both in and out, all the way to have somebody like a Tipalti pay outbound.
One of the important things is, Pradeep, and based on my experience, money is a huge incentive. Okay, people, especially in partner programs, visibility, okay, is the key. How much they're going to get paid or not going to get paid, where the payment stands, are if they and also as we talked about, every transaction is changing. On one deal, I'm the influencer, and the other deal that I'm actually selling it. So my relationship on a deal is also changing. So no longer, it's pretty obvious. Doing everything in Excel is complicated. You'll not be able, because the data is changing, the deals are changing. How do you keep up with that? But the important part, coming back to the payout, the important part is the partner should have the visibility, how much money is owed to them at any given point, and how much, and the distribution of funds in most effective way is the key, because that's in an engine, that is the grease. That greases the system. So visibility and money, that will grease the system, and then everything runs properly. So
absolutely. Yeah, and as you said, unfortunately, the world is still a coin-operated machine. We still have to put money in that machine and pull the trigger. In fact, I was at an event. I think I met Kevin from the marketing team in Mindmarix, right, at that event. And we were talking to an SVP of partnerships who says, There was an instance where at the end of the quarter, this was a public company. At the end of the quarter, I'm telling a partner they're not getting paid. So to your point, Harbinder, right? You've done everything to get the deal in the door. Maybe you were 10% short. Maybe you were 15% short. Maybe you're halfway there. Visibility into how you're getting compensated is critical. You can do everything right and still not get paid. That's a bad surprise for you as an organization. That's a bad surprise for you as a partner, because you're constantly trying to make a decision which partner to work with in this hyperscaler world, right? To your point. We also found another instance very recently, a telco saying, we are using Snowflake because that's where we have our usage data and we're doing queries against Snowflake. Clearly very auditable process. So that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to change. To your point, is just holistically thinking about the process and not surprise yourself, because obviously you want your partners to bring in more business, but on the other side, make sure the partners are successful because they feel incented to bring that business. I know we're at 30 minutes. Any questions? I know Lincoln, you asked a great question here. Any other questions? We're happy to take some. We can keep talking. Will be useful to get what some of the folks here on the line thinking. Any questions we can answer for you.
So I'll break in as we wait for a question. I don't think there's one coin machine anymore. I think there's multiple. There might be 3 or 4 coin machines. One is obviously the programmatic dollars and the different ways that we're going to earn, moving forward in that relationship with our vendors. The second coin machine now comes out of digital marketplaces. And these are the private offers. These are the multi-partner offers. These are the distributor sellers of records and a number of other economics around co-sell and other types of activities. The third coin machine, and the largest for partners, is the multiplier. And it comes from customers. For every dollar of cloud, whether it's consumption or SaaS, kicks out between $6 and $7 of services opportunity. Before, during, and after the transaction, there's a 6 or 7x multiplier on where I could go make $600,000 for every $100,000 that AWS or Microsoft or Salesforce or ServiceNow, Workday, HubSpot makes. And that's the big coin machine. So, as a partner, I'm looking at all 3 of these now going, okay, this is not as linear as it was in the past. And with marketplaces, they're telling my end customer that the value of resale is 3%. That's what the fees are today. And it happens to be identical to running your credit card at a restaurant. Visa and MasterCard had about 17 financial companies to take that 3% for the transaction. That's it. But in this gross to nets, in this broader 10, 20, what we used to think was 40% margins in the 1980s, there is a willingness to pay that, to reduce the cost to acquire a customer, to fund the renewal and retention rate to 108%. Every company's not looking to reclaim 10 or 20% to their bottom line. What they're doing is just getting smarter on how to spend that money. And partners are getting smarter in terms of these coin machines and figuring out how to leverage them and what the cheat codes are inside of them. So this is kind of the new world. And as much as we talk to vendors and distributors, we also talk to partners.
Yeah, you said it, and we keep thinking the 4 V's: volume, both in terms of partners and relationships. We talk about velocity, to your point, right? As you said, Jay, velocity, how quickly can you actually get up and running? And if you're successful, can you keep track of that? Talk about variability. If you got so many different relationships, as you mentioned, post-sale, pre-sale, whatever, they're so Snowflake and so unique. And then lastly, as you mentioned, Harbinder, visibility. Those are 4 key questions. So anybody sitting in there working with an alliance system has to ask themselves, can you handle those 4 V's? The second aspect is, how do you create a system of intelligence that bridges the gap across your CRM, your PRM, your bidding, and your ERP, so you accurately know where that is? That's what we're after together. And that's what this new economics of partnering requires, of RevOps, a different way to look at RevOps, which is the start of the journey, signing up with the partners, but more importantly, partner RevOps from that partner mindset. No longer, as you said, the partner guys and the CFOs can no longer be the red-headed stepchild from a partnership and an ecosystem. Well, they need to be more in the world of how do you look at that as you said, 96% of revenue is going to come from there. Why is that a red-headed stepchild? It's about time that it gets the limelight that it deserves.
No, I agree. Lincoln brought a good point, actually, and I've been looking at the comment. he said now the RevOps teams we have to look at differently. We need to teach them about the partner motions, so they no longer can be working in a silo. So that's an excellent point, I think, Lincoln. That's I think the change has to happen, how the RevOps look at the whole thing.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I know, Jay, you also had mentioned first party data, third party data. Those are also part of where Mindmatrix plays a very important role. Is you've got, no longer can you track with cookies. That's going away, right? But that also means you've got a platform that has the ability to look at it holistically and then tie out the knots, if you will, right? Still create that breadcrumb trail. Thoughts there, Harbinder,
Yeah,
Jay?
I try to not to do this publicly that often, but I'll credit Harbinder on his vision 28 years ago. But he built a direct sales CRM engine that was linked to a partner PRM system, that was linked to a marketing system. There were decades before, anyone else kind of caught up. He was thinking about a system where sales and marketing and CX work hand in hand with partnerships. What Mindmatrix becomes in this is the collector. It's the platform economy. It's the one layer out of 7 that starts to fill up this data lake. And while Mindmatrix may not have all the tools, it's the repository of where those data points go, the 28 moments over here, the every 30 over there. And as we're going to feed these language models, and then as we're going to execute on them, Mindmatrix working with Settle is kind of part of this new economics where Mindmatrix plus Settle equals 3. But you're still going to have 5 other layers in your channel tech stack. There's 11 islands to choose from today. But the fact of the matter is, just like other platform economies in SaaS, in cybersecurity, in consumption of cloud, these major platforms create these sources of truth. They create these data lakes that will create the next decades of how to become a channel partner alliance professional on the front edge by using AI tools. So this is, kind of groundbreaking, and 2024, I think, will be looked back on as a big turning point, not only in our customers, our economy, our economics, and how we think about partnering, but how all our friends across the organization think about it as well. And, what got us here from a technology and a process perspective and a people perspective isn't going to get us there. That's the conclusion from today, is everyone, until the end of 2024 has to be thinking about the pilots that they're going to be running to do this and to rethink how they're going to, automate for the future and the future scale. For all the partners you have in your system today, you're going to need 10 times more. And you're not going to be able to hire more people. You're not going to be able to spend more money. The CFO is not going to cut you a bigger check. So this is the turning point. What got you here isn't going to get you there. And it's the time to start investing time talking to companies like Mindmatrix and Settle and others about how it's going to look going forward.
Harbinder, you're always the leader.
No. I trust me. I'm just being in the game. So for me is why I started this, to make a difference. Now there's an opportunity to make a difference. That's, to me, was main focus. And I think when I look at this in my journey, try to keep the architecture, the data model open, because to me it's the game of data. The data is changing, coming from multiple sources, some places where we're generating the data, but be more as a platform, interconnectivity with third-party applications, Salesforce, other CRMs where the data is going to come in. And then the other important part is having the rules engine, the automation, the AI that can actually act on this data. That's important. So we're actually introducing pretty shortly, our RAG model on AI. So we'll be actually providing a separation of data set within Mindmatrix that could be AIs could be trained on. One is the partner data, individual partner data. So you may have personal data, and then you have a vendor data, and then you have a public data. So having these different data layers within the platform, and how you teach them, how you enable, how you do intelligence on these different data sets, that is really the next step for us, that how we're introducing our platform to the world.
And that you made a very important point, which is, it's insights. I think we've all heard data, etc., but insights and the ability to have AI work and provide actionable insights are critical. And that's where we're happy to kind of partnering with the Mindmatrix team, because as we think about it, one of the biggest inputs, JT, as you mentioned, teams are getting smaller. You can't expect more resources, right? You're expecting lesser resources, but the number of partners is increasing. So how do you handle more partners with lesser, manpower, if you will, is where you're going to need platforms, where you need insights off of data that can happen automatically, if you will. And we're focusing on that as well, is not just get retroactively looking at what you're expecting. Ask yourself the question, do I know what's coming for me for commission? So forecasting is important. That question has to come in. Can you look at 3 agreements? If you are somebody supporting 3 hyperscalers, can you ask yourself that confidently, looking at these 3 different agreements across 3 different hyperscalers, which one should I be directing, which is more profitable? Those are questions that need to be asked. And you can't just keep looking at backward looking data. Being able to predict is kind of where we come in, is where we're applying a lot of that AI and thought processes. Look at where it is historically, run some transactions, forecast, so I know where to, as you say, double down the chips on the ones where you expect more. So that's our key, is basically thinking forward while still making sure you're shoring your business as you stand today and be able to grow.
Agreed. So I think we have come to an end here. It's been a very exciting conversation. Thank you, Jay, for your time. You've been always an awesome contributor and thoughtful leader. You know the space pretty well, and we're learning a lot from you. And so thank you, Pradeep, for the partnership. And pretty excited to bring Settle and Mindmatrix together into the marketplace and make a difference. So
thank you. Yeah, no, you said it well. I'll just say this for both of us. We're both at Catalyst next week, right in Chicago. So and so is Jay. Please come find us. I'm sure you've got lots of questions. We certainly would like to learn from you as well, what's going out in the real world. So by all means, come find us, tag us, and we'll happy to basically be able to answer your questions and share more so in addition to the business, what our platforms can do. I know some of you may want a sneak peek, so come find us, and we're happy to kind of answer your questions and show you what's possible as well in this new world of ecosystem and decade of the ecosystem and the 28 touch points, which are no longer just order and transaction based. So thanks everybody, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.